the DMZ. He's expected to meet DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un in a short while. Now, for the latest situation on this crucial visit, let's cross live to our correspondent Jack Barton at DMZ and our correspondent Shane Harm in Seoul. Let's start with you, Jack. What's going on there right now? Has the South Korean president arrived? And more importantly, is there any confirmation of the arrival of the DPRK leader?
We haven't had any confirmation yet that Kim Jong Un has arrived at the DMZ, but sort of all the expectations are that this is going to happen. We did see two South Korean presidential office helicopters touch down before Trump's helicopters, so we assume that President Moon and his entourage was inside those helicopters. Then we saw about half a dozen American military helicopters and South Korean head in, and then those two helicopters, one of them carrying President Trump. They landed about a quarter of an hour ago, and then President Trump and his entourage moved into those vehicles, and we're told it took them about 5 minutes to travel to the joint security area.
Now, Jack, as we speak, US President Donald Trump and his South Korean counterpart has now started their visit. You can see that US President Donald Trump is greeting US soldiers, accompanied by his South Korean counterpart. This is live footage from the DMZ between the north and south side of the Korean Peninsula. So, Jack, you were saying what exactly is going to happen? We can see there will be a visit to the US troops there. This is happening now, and I guess the remaining part is a possible meeting between the DPRK leader and himself.
That's right, with the official part of the visit, as announced, was to meet with US and South Korean troops that man the joint security area and also visit the operation post Duet, an observation post very close to a DPRK post where we've seen 4 presidents in the past visit to hold binoculars and view the other side. But yeah, it's the potential meeting with Kim Jong Un that is drawing so much excitement and some criticism from some quarters, of course. People saying it's just a photo opportunity. What can this really encourage? Trump today saying that he thought this could get the momentum back, also saying that he thought that the Hanoi summit had not ended poorly. In his eyes, that it had sort of encouraged more, and it had done more than the actual Singapore summit, which he saw as just a photo op. And he saw, sitting down, having these talks, perhaps not getting a deal on the spot, but at least finding out each other's positions and being able to slowly move forward was more important. And according to Trump at that press conference, again, that's what he is trying to achieve here today. Without any doubt, though, whether Kim Jong Un does turn up or not, there is renewed momentum. So what we're seeing is that those denuclearization talks that stalled after that summit in Hanoi back in February, they do seem to be regaining traction. It's not just today, of course. There was the meeting between President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong Un in Pyongyang. We've seen a lot of the talks at the G20 about reviving this process, but now today, definitely, whether Kim turns up or not, appears to be a breakthrough moment.
Now, Jack, as we speak, US President Donald Trump is accompanied by his South Korean counterparts and taking a tour of the DMZ. And earlier footage showed that he looks beyond the border and to the north side of the DMZ. So, talking about that, we know the Korean War is not officially ended. So, if the DPRK leader and the US President, the first sitting US President, this meeting actually happens, what signal can it send to this war itself?
Well, it sends a huge signal, of course, because if they do meet, it is very likely it will be on the northern side. So he will become the first sitting US president to visit the DPRK. That would be a huge breakthrough in itself. But he also visits the joint security area at a time of enormous change. If he'd gone there 2 years ago, as he planned, he would have found helmeted soldiers with firearms facing off against each other in a very tense environment where there was very limited area of movement, and even officials had to be cautious when they were guided around. Now the helmets are gone, the guns are gone. There are 35 troops on either side, but they're already working on plans to open the space up so they can move freely across to the north and south and create a genuine neutral area. So this is a big change. 2 years ago, we're told Moon didn't really want Trump to go up to the DMZ. He was probably glad when the bad weather stopped him. This time, though, Moon without doubt would have been encouraging President Trump to visit the joint security area and see some of the real tangible signs of progress, and they are tangible signs of progress that have come out of the inter-Korean cooperation on the sidelines of all of this.
Well, Jack, keep us updated. Now let's go to Shane in the South Korean capital. So Shane, tell us a little bit more about the role South Korea has played in this latest development.
Well, all indications are that South Korean President Moon Jae-in is going to take a mediating role. He had indicated in his press conference just about 30 minutes ago at the presidential office behind me, standing with U.S. President Donald Trump, that he is willing to step aside when this apparent historic moment takes place, when President Trump meets with Chairman Kim of the Dprk. And that's not only an actual gesture by President Moon, but it's also very symbolic in where South Korea stands in terms of the denuclearization issue of the Dprk. South Korea is willing to let the United States take a leading role in bilateral talks with the Dprk, and from there, President Moon has indicated that he's willing to enhance inter-Korean cooperation following that. And they do go hand in hand, but ever since the Hanoi summit really fell apart without any tangible agreement, we've seen inter-Korean cooperation pretty much come to a standstill as well. There have been hopes of economic engagement. There's a joint liaison office that's been set up at the joint border town of Kaesong. Officials from the Dprk and South Korea were supposed to meet every week on Friday, but that hasn't happened for months as well. So as far as the optics are concerned, with President Moon accompanying President Trump up to the DMZ, but allowing President Trump to meet with Chairman Kim one-on-one, it really symbolizes where South Korea stands in the grand scheme of things at this point.
Thank you very much, our correspondent Shane Harm in Seoul and our correspondent Jack Barton at the DMZ. Of course, we'll keep you updated. Now, for more insight, we're joined in the studio by Mr. Teng Jianqun, a senior fellow with the China Institute of International Studies. Now, from earlier footage, we can see that US President Donald Trump has arrived at the DMZ. Tell us a little bit more about this particular area and also the JSA, Joint Security Area. Of that particular area.
Yeah, actually, this is a routine job for any president to visit ROK before, but this time I think it's of specific significance for the situation in Korean Peninsula, especially for the meetings between Chairman Kim Jong Un and the President Donald Trump. This is actually a continuation of engagement for both sides. You know, Donald Trump would like to continue such momentum, and Chairman Kim Jong Un, of course, would like to do the same. And they all have strong driving forces in their hearts to go ahead, and I'm sure the visit by President Donald Trump to DMZ and the joint security area is a symbolic one, but I think they can get a good feeling, as mentioned by President Donald Trump during the briefing, toward each other and continue the engagement between the two sides.
You just mentioned that both the US and Dprk leaders are willing to make this meeting happen, and it's easy to get evidence from the US side, but because President Donald Trump has been quite vocal about this upcoming meeting, and also he said this morning that he got along well with the Dprk leader, and he knows that a lot of good feelings are going on. But what kind of evidence, what facts is your observation based on saying that the Dprk leader is also willing to make this happen?
The recent years we have witnessed great changes of policies in Dprk. For example, last year in April, 2018, the Labour Party adopted a new strategy guideline to develop its economy and to improve its social life. This is a
you mean the Workers' Party of Korea?
Yeah, Labour Party. Yeah. This is actually a very significant change, a policy change, I mean, to Dprk. After possessing the nuclear bomb, Chairman Kim Jong Un would like to shift a little bit his attention to the development of its economy and the improvement of social life. And this is actually a big change for Dprk, and this is actually an echo to the policies given by President Donald Trump. Why there's such a stable condition since early last year, just because of the two countries just gave very specific policies toward each other. No tension they would like to have at that time, and now I'm sure they will continue their effort to engage each other.
So as we speak, U.S. President Donald Trump, accompanied by his South Korean counterpart, is touring the south side, of course, of the DMZ, or the JSA to be specific. Tell us a little bit more about the U.S. military presence in South Korea. It's a legacy of the Second World War, also the Cold War, right?
Yeah, it's a legacy of the Korean War, actually. In early 1950s, there was war. Involved a lot of casualties with the countries concerned, and China actually suffered 180,000 soldiers in that war, and this is really a great contribution by China to maintain the peace and stability in Korean Peninsula. And I think the two sides, Dprk and the United States, still at war, and there is no treaty of normalizing
There's
relations.
No peace agreement, only an armistice deal.
Yeah. This is actually a very embarrassing situation for countries concerned. But I think the big issue, or the most challengeable issue at this moment, is mistrust between Dprk and the United States, and how can meet such the big gap of mistrust. So I think the coming meeting between Chairman Kim Jong Un and President Donald Trump will give some effort, give some driving forces to meet such a big gap.
So talking about this mistrust or this gap you just described, so let me refer you to words from President Donald Trump on this morning's press conference with Moon Jae-in. He said at the beginning there was a lot of anger between him and Kim Jong Un, but now they get along and a lot of good feelings are going on. Do you really believe that the mistrust has been reduced through interactions in whatever kind?
There has been no fundamental changes in this regard, but I think there are some good feelings toward each other. During the past month, they wrote to each other and they gave some a very positive attitude toward each other. I'm sure they can. They would like to continue such momentum of engagement. And actually, Donald Trump has adopted a very specific policy, very different from the previous ones. Even during the Clinton's administration, there was an opportunity almost of a visit by President Clinton to Pyongyang, but at the last minute, he denied to go to Pyongyang because this is a very sensitive issue for any politician in the United States. But as for President Donald Trump, he does not care about these issues. He would like to go by his own way. So that's why the relations between Dprk and the United States have been changed so greatly, at least in recent 1 year. And
are you still seeing that momentum you just described, even after the breakdown of Trump and Kim's summit in Hanoi earlier this year?
Yeah, I think at least by the year of 2020, because of the coming presidential election. I'm sure Donald Trump just thinking about the such a meeting, even it's a symbolic one, but it will give some, a positive impact on his re-election as the president of the United States. And at least in recent 18 months, before the election in next
November,
year, I'm sure Donald Trump will be in great patience to go ahead, because he has already invested a lot in this game, and he cannot just said, oh no, it's a failure at this moment today. He would like to say it's a victory. It's a great victory for him. During the after the Hanoi summit, I think last February, he said this is a victory. This is a big victory for the United States, for the U.S. president, and for the first time, the United States, is now enjoying a very secure and very comfortable situation. Especially Dprk has suspended its nuclear test and missile test. This is a great achievement for President Donald Trump. So he would like to say in that way, and he would like to continue to say in that way, because this might be a legacy, diplomatic legacy for him for the presidential election next year.
So, election politics aside, at the end of the day, he will have to face the hard fact that the denuclearization process that he's been hailing about, is it going anywhere? Do you see a clear direction the denuclearization process is going forward, or it's stalled, or it's even going backwards? Because you just said the Dprk has the nuclear technology, and now it's put into stockpile, and they are focusing on economy. So where can this denuclearization issue go? Yeah,
Dprk not only has got the nuclear technology, but also has got the bomb and also the missiles in their hand. I think they cannot, give up, in one day, because that might be a bargaining chip in the hand of Chairman Kim Jong Un. In recent 1 year, he met our president, U.S. president, and the Russian president. Why? That might be, a game played by a small country like Dprk, and they will give Chairman Kim Jong Un great benefit. And I'm sure, without any assurance from the large powers or the middle powers in security, I don't think Dprk will go ahead in its denuclearization. And I'm sure maybe someday, technically speaking, they can gave up such capability, in bomb and in missiles.
As we speak, we can see the live footage from the DMZ after touring some watch posts. US President Donald Trump's convoy has left this specific location, and according to the information we've gathered, his next item on the agenda for Sunday afternoon could be highly likely a meeting between him and the Dprk's top leader. Now, again, let's cross live to our correspondents Jack Barton and Shane Hart. Jack, again, we saw that US President Donald Trump has finished his inspection or touring of some watch posts. What's going to happen next?
Well, as you put it, the next step could be a meeting with Kim Jong Un. We still don't know, haven't had confirmation whether he's actually arrived or what's actually going on. All of the comments we've had so far appear to indicate that that is the case. Certainly the enormous security presence we've seen around here, and the hope and expectation where I'm standing also is that it's going to happen. I'm on the back edge of the Peace Park at Imjingak, just on the edge of the restricted area for the Demilitarized Zone. Normally there's quite a few people here on a Sunday, but I haven't seen this many people since President Moon and Kim Jong Un held their first summit. So it seems a lot of people have come up from Seoul today. Even though it's a couple of kilometers away, the JSA deep within the restricted area, there's quite a festive atmosphere here as people turn out in the hope that this is a historic moment. But will that historic moment come? Of course, everybody here is hoping it will, but we're going to have to wait and see.
Well, Jack, we have been saying that Trump and Kim is expected to meet at the DMZ. So where exactly? Will they be meeting at the peace village of Panmunjom?
Yeah, it's expected they'll meet in the joint security area, and what we're hearing, again, we've had no confirmation of this, but the expectation is that Kim Jong Un will take him over to the northern side, into the Tongilgak building. It's a building that you can see if you're standing on the south side facing over. Of course, we can't step over there, but if he's invited over, they'll go up, presumably with Donald Trump's entourage. Today he's been, traveling with officials, but we know at least Ivanka Trump is with him, probably a few other officials, to go up and hold talks in there. What the talks will be about, though, is unclear. Trump initially billed this as a handshake and a hello. Clearly, if this happens, it's broadening out into something a little bit deeper than that. We're not expecting a big comprehensive framework or a deal to be struck here. This clearly isn't a summit, but perhaps there could be some takeout that is a little bit more than just a photo opportunity. And one does suspect, given that all of this seems to have fallen into place in a very organized manner, that perhaps this was, in the pipeline a little bit before Trump sent out that tweet, and the tweet might have been sent, and again, this is just speculation, the tweet might have been sent when it appeared that the momentum for this meeting might have been falling into place.
Now, Jack, put our discussion into bigger context. Tell us a little bit more about the military presence in the DMZ. We know it's the most militarized area on the planet.
Yeah, well, the DMZ itself is about 240 kilometers long, about 4 kilometers wide, with the military demarcation area in the middle. And there are some sort of outposts throughout the DMZ. There's a lot of mines, but it actually is a demilitarized area. The problem is it's just outside. If you're where I am and you start driving along the roads here, just outside the restricted area, you will come across military base after military base after military base, more artillery, Katyusha rocket launchers, all sorts of things. It is a major build-up. Having said that, a lot of the bases or the firing ranges, those areas, now have a padlock on the gate. So that's been the big difference over the past 12 months. We've seen a lot of the big guns drawn back. Live fire exercises have stopped along the demilitarized zone. You used to be able to hear them quite frequently around here. And we really have seen a major de-escalation of tensions. The plan, certainly from South Korea, and one must assume the Dprk is on board this, is to de-escalate tensions further if there can be further traction in the denuclearization talks. So what President Moon Jae-in wants in the end is, really building, I should add, there's also a no-fly zone for military aircraft over this area as well. But to really build on that, even go to the point of both North and South scrapping short-range missiles that can strike each other. And certainly President Moon wants the Dprk to pull back all of its heavy artillery that can hit Seoul, which is only about 50 kilometers away from where we are right now. So it's within the striking range of those short-range rockets, very heavy artillery. But again, that's a distant plan, but already we have seen big moves over the past 12 months.
So besides missiles and cannons, what about the old school propaganda loudspeakers and balloons with leaflets? Are they also part of a history now?
They are, to a degree. Now, the balloons, the government has tried to stop the release of those. Of course, they are people who have defected from the Dprk. They're not very happy about that. But that has largely been stopped. The propaganda speakers absolutely have been silenced. That's not too far from here, just a few kilometers away. Big speakers on both sides, but actually all along the DMZ in various areas, there were very loud propaganda speakers in place, blaring all day long. All of that has gone as well. And of course, this all feeds into not just measures at the DMZ. We've seen all these cultural exchanges, sporting exchanges. We've seen so much more inter-Korean interaction. The problem is now there really needs to be more progress in the denuclearization diplomacy for it to carry forward, particularly because the next step is really economic cooperation. It's about reopening the joint industrial area. A few kilometers away from here at Kaesong on the northern side of the DMZ, about reintroducing tours by Southerners and others to Mount Kumgang in the DMZ, and about that multi-billion-dollar road and rail infrastructure upgrade for the DPRK, none of which can happen while the current sanctions are in place. President Moon hoping if Kim and Trump, obviously not here today, but can come to a broader summit, come up with a deal where in return for some concrete things that are given up by Pyongyang, at least South Korea can engage in economic cooperation, and that can be the giveaway to the DPRK. That's all in the flow at the moment, but that's what is really needed to take this to the next level.
Thank you very much, Jack. Our correspondent Jack Barton at the DMZ. Now let's go to Shane Harm in Seoul. Shane, what's the main expectation in South Korea towards this possible meeting between the US president and the DPRK leader at the DMZ?
Well, the latest reports, I'm monitoring local media reports here, and indications are suggesting that there might actually be a trilateral meeting between the heads of the three countries involved here, the United States, the DPRK, and South Korea. But to answer your question, as far as what the expectation is from the South Korean side, President Moon Jae-in's prime policy, DPRK policy, is of course establishing a peace regime here on the Korean Peninsula. And his way or method of getting to that point is through engagement. But that can't begin until, as Jack mentioned just a moment ago, that these denuclearization efforts also have to make headway as well. But as far on that side, we haven't seen much progress since the Hanoi talks really broke down a couple of months ago, earlier this year as well. Where I'm standing right now here in the heart of downtown Seoul, the presidential office is right behind me. In this plaza is where the candlelight protests took place about 2-3 years ago. We saw the impeachment of the former South Korean president, and here you can see ralliers gathered, both anti and pro DPRK and President Trump engagement. So it's a highly contentious issue here, but as far as the administration is concerned, they want to move ahead with this peace process, but President Moon Jae-in knows fully well that that can't progress, especially on an economic level, until the diplomatic issues are resolved first. Pando?
Thank you very much, Shane. We'll be getting back to you on this. Our correspondents Jack Barton and Shane Harm. Now, until the collapse of the Soviet Union, US diplomacy with Pyongyang was non-existent. That changed in the 1990s as concern grew over the DPRK's plans to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Washington looked for a potential deal with Pyongyang. 25 years of misunderstanding and missed opportunities followed. Nathan King looks back on the diplomatic dance between Washington and Pyongyang.
The end of the Cold War also meant the withdrawal of tactical nuclear weapons by the US and then the Soviet Union from global hotspots, including the Korean Peninsula. US troops remained, however, at the DPRK border. Then, in 1994, former US President Jimmy Carter went to Pyongyang in a bid to persuade DPRK leader Kim Il-sung to halt construction on nuclear reactors. Later that year, Washington and Pyongyang signed the agreed framework, freezing work on the reactors and the production of plutonium in return for fuel shipments and economic aid. The diplomacy, though difficult, bore fruit. In 2000, DPRK senior military leader Jo Myung-rok met with the US President Bill Clinton at the White House. Then US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright travelled to Pyongyang to meet leader Kim Jong Un in a bid to expand the agreed framework and pave the way for a presidential visit to Pyongyang. The attempt, however, failed.
Constitute an axis of evil.
But in 2002, George W. Bush, a new president in response to the 9/11 terror attacks, declared an axis of evil, lumping Pyongyang in with Washington's enemies in the Middle East. John Bolton, now the National Security Advisor, but then in charge of arms control of the State Department, accused the DPRK of cheating. Pyongyang accused Washington of reneging on its commitments, and the agreed framework fell apart. In 2003, blaming US aggression, Pyongyang pulled out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty a signal that a nation is contemplating building an atomic bomb. After Pyongyang withdrew from the NPT, regional powers led by China held a series of so-called six-party talks. Despite intense diplomacy, Washington and Pyongyang remained at odds. In 2006, the Dprk conducted its first nuclear test. Sanctions followed. Even though the six-party talks lasted until 2009, a breakthrough remained elusive. Under Barack Obama, the US then embarked on a period of what is called strategic patience, trying to bring Pyongyang to the negotiating table with economic sanctions. A new Dprk leader, Kim Jong Un, banned international weapons inspections as he moved forward with a nuclear weapons program at an accelerated pace. The election of US President Donald Trump coincided with an escalation of nuclear and ballistic missile testing by Pyongyang and an escalation in hostile rhetoric from both leaders.
Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime. The United States is ready, willing, and able, but hopefully this will not be necessary.
Both leaders threatened nuclear war. Kim Jong Un responded in a rare personal rebuke, calling the US president a dotard. But a turnaround came just as fast. Capitalizing on a peace offering made by Kim Jong Un in his New Year's address, South Korean President Moon Jae-in invited the Dprk to compete in the Winter Olympics. The two Koreas walked out as one team. Diplomatic meetings were held. Nathan King, CGTN, at the White House.
Now, Mr. Let's talk about this saga Nathan just reported. Let's go back to the origin of the current so-called Dprk nuclear issue. Who's really to blame back then? Is the United States betrayed its promise, or was it the Dprk to blame?
It's a very complicated question. Actually, both sides, I mean, Dprk and the United States should, pay the price for such a development of nuclear technology in Dprk. For example, the security concern from Dprk actually has been there for decades, especially after the breakup of the former Soviet Union. This event gave a very negative impact on the decision makers to think about their security. And the United States would like to use the military threat as leverage to destroy the government of Dprk. And actually, nuclear issue is not only a technical issue in this regard. For example, some experts argue that this is actually an excuse for the United States. For example, during Clinton's administration and during Bush's administration, they just gave a very a complicated attitude toward Dprk. Why? They just would like to have some excuse to continue the deployment of U.S. troops in Northeast Asia. This is actually a geopolitical competition. They would like to deploy their troops, so many troops in Northeast Asia, and not only to contain Dprk, but also other major powers, China and Russia.
Also targeted
so
by
this is
not
a technical issue. This is actually a geopolitical competition.
Is it still a geopolitical competition right now?
Yeah, you're right. But I think Donald Trump would like to think in another way, something like the policy adopted by Bill Clinton, the Democratic president, and he would like to adopt a policy of engagement, because the military threat or the so-called maximum pressure on Dprk got nothing, at least for at least 1 year, and then Donald Trump changed the policy just because of the engagement between the two Koreans early last year. And this is actually another turning point for the U.S. government, especially for President Donald Trump, to think about whether it's a good policy just by put maximum pressure on Dprk. And I'm sure he has already realized that the United States cannot reach the target by just using military threat. And this time he changed a little bit to the so-called economic cooperation.
Do you think
and
this kind of thinking is more business-like rather than a diplomatic one, simple give and take?
Yeah, this is actually a business idea or thinking way for the United States. President Donald Trump actually used to be a businessman. He would like to give some business thinking in the game played by the two sides. I mean by the United States and the Dprk. And of course, he has got a lot of oppositions in the United States and even in ROK. Some people don't like such an idea to engage Dprk or to give more opportunities, especially economic cooperation to Dprk, because there are at least 7 sanctions resolutions adopted by the UN Security Council. You cannot go ahead without the lifting of these sanctions resolutions. So I think the US...
Sorry, talking about the lifting of sanctions, let's say best case scenario, the US and the Dprk were to advance their current relationship to a better shape. Will the two have to wait for the lifting of the UN sanctions to do so? And talking about give and take, what if a good scenario happens and there were outside investment coming into the Dprk, so the UN sanctions has to be lifted in the very first place? Is that the right process?
I don't think at this moment the UN Security Council will reach agreement or consensus in this regard.
No, not at this moment. Yeah. We're talking about best case scenario in the near future, maybe.
Yeah, you're right. I think some countries, in Security Council, have already proposed to partially, lift the sanctions against Dprk, just because Dprk has given up some, capabilities, for example, the testing side of nuclear.
Right. Now, Mr. Dunn, let's cross live again to the DMZ. US President Donald Trump has now arrived at the venue, meeting with US and South Korean troops. Accompanying him is South Korean President Moon Jae-in. The two leaders are expected to address the troops in the room.
I would like to thank you for all your dedication and efforts. You are indeed standing at the forefront of the spot where you are safeguarding peace and freedom of the Republic of Korea.
한미 양국의 대통령들이 이곳 비무장지대를 함께 방문한 것은 사상 처음 있는 일입니다.
It is actually the first time in history that the President of the Republic of Korea and the President of the United States has visited this demilitarized zone in history.
오늘은 더 극적인 일이 기다리고 있습니다.
And today, this afternoon, we have a more dramatic event that awaits us.
이런 결단을 내려주신 트럼프 대통령께 감사드립니다.
And I'd like to thank President Trump for making such a bold decision.
이제 제2에서 A는 대결과 분쟁의 상징에서 평화의 상징으로 바뀌고 있습니다. 여러분은 그 위대한 역사의 변화를 보고 있는 그 현장에 있습니다.
And now the joint security area is being transformed from the symbol of confrontation and hostilities to the symbol of peace. And all of you are actually witnesses to this great change.
그 위대한 변화를 만들고 있는 주인공이 바로 트럼프 대통령입니다.
And the very person who has actually brought this great change about is, of course, President Trump.
여러분들의 자랑스러운 대통령입니다.
He is the proud president of all of you.
So I want to thank you very much. You're a very special group of people. I just look at you, look how healthy and how strong and how good, and we really appreciate it. We appreciate it very much.
네, 먼저 감사드리겠습니다. 여러분들은 매우 특별한 분들이십니다. 그리고 여러분들을 보니까 매우 강하고 또 아주 튼튼하다라는 것을 볼 수가 있습니다. 대단히 감사합니다.
So this was a scheduled visit from a number of months ago. We went from the G20, and I promised your president, President Moon, who is a friend of mine, I said we have to see the DMZ
And so this was scheduled for a long time ago. And then yesterday I had the idea, maybe I'll call Chairman Kim and see if he wants to say hello. So we didn't give him much notice, but we've become, we respect each other. We respect each other, maybe even like each other. And he's agreed to meet, and I'm going to meet him in about 4 minutes. So I'm going to cut my speech a little bit short, other than to say you are terrific people. You've done a fantastic job, and we're with you all the way. You know that.
네, 이번 방문은 사실 수개월 전부터 계획된 것입니다. 그렇지만은 G20 오사카에서 회의를 하고 문 대통령께 나는 비무장지대를 반드시 방문해야 되겠다라고 얘기를 해서 여기 왔습니다. 그런데 어제 갑자기 내가 이까지 왔으니까 김 위원장을 만나보는 것이 좋겠다. 그리고 서로 인사하면 어떨까? 그래서 굉장히 촉박한 시간 내에 이렇게 만남이 이루어진 것입니다. 김 위원장과 나는 서로 존경심을 가지고 있고 우리 서로 사이가 좋습니다. 그리고 아까 약 4분 후에 김 위원장을 만나야 되기 때문에 내가 길게 얘기할 수는 없습니다. 다만 여러분들이 아주 훌륭한 분들이시고 소중한 분들이다라는 말씀을 드리고 싶습니다. 감사합니다.
What do you have over there? What do you have? That looks good.
Yeah, Mr. President, we have a small token of appreciation and recognition of your visit here to the Republic of Korea. We're grateful for your leadership, you and President Moon, and all that you do for the ROK-US Alliance. And so we have a small token of appreciation. Everyone knows you're a golfer, and there's some golfers in the room.
Who's a golfer?
The two leaders have just made in that venue inside the JSA joint security area. President Moon Jae-in said this is the first time in history that the president of the US and South Korea have jointly visited that particular area. Why hasn't that happened in earlier history?
Yeah, that's a specific arrangement for the two presidents. Today I think there was some president of the United States paid visit to DMZ, just far away from the joint security
JSA,
area, JSA. So I think this is the first time for the president from the United States and from ROK to pay such a visit. This is a historic, as mentioned by President Moon Jae-in.
He called it a bold decision.
Yeah, bold decision by President Donald Trump.
Yes.
A little bit flattering, from the leader of ROK. But I think this is a very important step for the two leaders together to pay visit to GSC.
Yes, and in his short speech, President Donald Trump confirmed that this is a scheduled visit to the DMZ, but his decision to, in his own words, call up Mr. Kim and see if they can meet came in just yesterday. Do you really believe in that?
Yeah, this is actually an offer during the visit to Osaka by President attending the G20 summit. And actually, I heard some stories before that time. During early this month, we talked to some scholars and officials from the United States. They all said there is a possibility for the two leaders to meet in Panmunjom. This is actually a symbolic arrangement, and Donald Trump
and the venue is crucial. It will be in Panmunjom, so the actual border is there. So the two leaders, do you think they will side on each side of the border and just shake hands, or actually they will somehow cross the border from one side to another?
Something like the meeting between Moon Jae-in and Chairman Kim Jong Un last time. Just Moon Jae-in went to the
Kim Jong Un invited him to come across.
This is a very starting point, I think, for President Donald Trump. I'm not sure the opposition leaders in Washington D.C. what they gave, what the response to such a step.
What do you think? Will the response be?
To walk across the
so he will be the first U.S. president stepping on the Dprk territory.
Land. Yes, this is a very a starting point for the for the president of the United States. I'm not sure he can do that, or he just already decided to go to the land or territory of Dprk.
So but we are all guessing here. Back to his schedule, President Donald Trump said he will be meeting with the DPRK leader in minutes.
Yeah.
So the meeting is sure to happen. Again, the big question, will they talk about substantial issues, or at least will they agree on something that will push the talks forward in the near future?
I think this is mainly a symbolic meeting between the two leaders since last February, the second summit. I mean between President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong Un. They all are waiting for the step from their counterparts, and there is no action at least so far. So I think this time the meeting between the two leaders should be a symbolic one, but I think this is a continuation of engagement that might give more and more good feelings toward each other and to say hello to each other. That's enough, I think.
That's enough.
Yeah.
Okay, but what about the future talks? Do you think officials, even not leaders, will be meeting again?
Actually, yesterday I think during yesterday the two special envoys, one the special envoy from the United States, Mr. Begin, and also the Vice Foreign Minister Cho Song-hyu. Just met
from DPRK.
From DPRK, just met Banmujum just for the arrangement of
really,
this
that's from the official channel?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think they have some plans to go ahead, but at this moment I don't think Donald Trump will give any significant compromise in this regard, because the United States has already entered the election election month. And any policy taken by Donald Trump, I think he should give a full consideration whether it's good for his election or bad for his election. If bad, he can stop it, because any failure in this game might give some negative impact for his continuation to be the president of the United States. This is actually an election year, so they should have some full consideration for the U.S. president.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Tung. We'll be getting back to you on this. You're watching a special live coverage on CGTN. U.S. President Donald Trump is expected to be meeting with the DPRK's top leader, Kim Jong Un, very soon. So do stay tuned with CGTN. We'll be providing you with live coverage.
You've traveled to places where others couldn't be, seen things others couldn't imagine, and heard stories you can't be sure whether to believe. They say that you're privileged, that people look up to you, but only you know how much effort you've made. You're on the ultimate journey to discover a country with 5,000 years of history and nearly 1.5 billion people. Is it a green countryside or a vast sea of neon lights and skyscrapers? Is it a dangerous land choked with smog or the blue sky of a summer's day? What is this China for you? And what is this China for the rest of the world? CGTN. See the difference.
So just to remind you again on the upcoming big event, US President Donald Trump is now on his way to meet the DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un at DMZ, or to be specific, at the Peace Village of Panmunjom. Now, for more on this crucial visit, let's cross live to our correspondent Shane Harm in Seoul. So Shane, let me refer you to earlier statements from President Donald Trump this morning when he was meeting with South Korean President. He said since he took office, both the north and south part of Korea have been feeling much more safer. Is that the real momentum you've been getting in these years?
Well, I think it's telling. We heard just a couple of moments ago when President Trump indicated to troops there at Camp Boniface before his upcoming supposed visit with or meeting with Chairman Kim of the DPRK. He mentioned that this meeting was actually planned months in advance after he knew that he'd be flying to Japan for the G20 summit. So ever since Hanoi, the Hanoi summit really ended without a true concrete agreement. What that means is that working level officials from both sides were probably meeting or working under the table to try and continue this momentum of trying to get to this stage of denuclearization, because as far as anything officially, we hadn't seen anything. We saw statements from the DPRK criticizing both the United States and South Korea, but what we're seeing again is with President Trump and Chairman Kim, this top-down style of leadership where decisions are made from the top, whereas in past administrations we saw basically agreements made on the working level, and then when summits are held and leaders meet to agree, it's pretty much a done deal at this point. But with these two leaders, what we're seeing is that the momentum really begins with them and ends with them as well. And when this historic meeting takes place, the first time since in 66 years since the end of the Korean War, or the end of fighting, I should say. Technically, the war, of course, has not ended. We are going to see this historic meeting, but as far as substance and what you can expect, aside from the optics and the photo opportunities, probably nothing really substantial will be coming out, according to experts.
So, Shane, talking about where you are, I can tell that you're right in downtown Seoul, but there are some very loud voices going on around you. What's going on there?
Yeah, let me describe the scene there, Pandung. So I'm standing here in Gwanghwamun Plaza. This is, anyone that's visited Seoul, this is really in the heart of downtown Seoul. Right over my shoulder here is the presidential office. Right next to me off camera is the United States Embassy, the U.S. Embassy, and this is a gathering spot, of course, where both pro and anti-DPRK supporters, as well as pro and anti-Trump supporters all gather here, and you can see and hear off camera really what the sentiment is, and what that really tells you is where South Koreans stand as far as the DPRK is concerned. Ever since the peninsula was divided, it's been a highly contentious issue. But if you look at polls, you'll notice that much of the older generation, those that have a vested interest and actual family ties in certain instances with the DPRK, you'll see that many of them are conservative, that they have lived through and experienced, some of them, the Korean War, and really a lot of the animosity between the two sides. Younger generations really have grown up in a divided peninsula, and they really don't know what it's like to have a unified Korea. So it's a contentious issue. We know that President Moon is someone that is a liberal here and that is for rapprochement, for engagement with the DPRK, and that's why we've seen progress since his inauguration back in mid-2017. We've seen 3 inter-Korean summits and now possibly a third meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim of the DPRK.
So, Shane, you just mentioned that the younger generation in South Korea are more alienated from the very fact of the division of the peninsula. Will that be a kind of an active element in future interactions between the North and the South?
Well, as far as, again, negative is could be a subjective point of reference in this, but when you ask, I've spoken to many university students here, people in their 20s, and really the main reason, of course, in their heart as Koreans, they would like to see unification eventually. They've been told by their parents, by their grandparents, that it's an inevitable situation where the countries must unite somehow, but really the main reason they'd be against a pro-engagement with the DPRK is the economic aspects. We all know that South Korea and the DPRK, in terms of economic output, they're almost at opposite ends of the spectrum, and if unification were to occur, then that would cause economic devastation in some instances, or in how some may portray it. And that's why if you talk to pro-DPRK engagement sort of people, they say that the need to engage the DPRK both economically and both with humanitarian aid is necessary, so when the day does come that the two sides can or do unify, that it'll be a natural progression that'll happen organically as opposed to spontaneous thing. And it does look like, looking at monitoring events over at the DMZ, that President Trump will soon be meeting Chairman Kim. It looks like he's standing there with President Moon. So I'll toss it back over to you, Pandong.
Thank you very much, our correspondent Shane Harm in Seoul. Now let's cross live to our correspondent Jack Barton at the DMZ. Hello, Jack. About 15 minutes ago, US President Donald Trump, when addressing US and South Korean troops, said he will be meeting with the DPRK's top leader in 4 minutes. Now 15 minutes have passed. Has he arrived at the venue yet?
He seems to be there at the venue, ready to go. We're just waiting. It does seem that it could be minutes away now before that historic meeting. Of course, we're still waiting for confirmation that Kim Jong Un is actually at that building and will appear. But if it does happen, it will certainly be a momentous moment because, you know, Trump, yes, he is the 5th sitting president to visit the Demilitarized Zone, to address the troops there, to go to Outpost Ulit, and observe the opposite outpost. But to meet with a leader of the DPRK at the joint security area and potentially to cross the demarcation line, become the first sitting president to step into the DPRK to hold a face-to-face meeting with a leader there. I mean, these are all historic moments if they happen. And more importantly at the moment, it's all about getting these talks going again. As Shane mentioned before, I was talking earlier about how these negotiations really have been stalled since the Hanoi summit back in February failed to produce a deal. Many consider, though, that the talks had already stalled leading into that summit, and that the Hanoi summit really just confirmed that the positions were too far apart, that there was such a gulf between Washington and Pyongyang's negotiating position that it was just unbridgeable for the time being. What this is all indicating today is that perhaps that position has closed a little bit. Perhaps we are close to some sort of negotiating agreement that could get these talks moving forward again. And we know it's not just the two leaders talking today. We have had it confirmed now that there have been background discussions going on, that the communication had not stopped between Washington and Pyongyang, and in fact inter-Korean cooperation or communication has been going on quietly behind the scenes the whole time. So clearly there has been some communication. Clearly Kim Jong Un and Donald Trump kind of like what they've been hearing, otherwise we wouldn't be having this meeting today, and that's the important thing. The fact that they're meeting highlights the fact that there does seem to be agreement growing, rather than that some agreements will come out of this meeting today.
So Jack, earlier South Korean President Moon Jae-in said that the JSA, the very venue we've been focusing on, the Joint Security Area, has been transformed into a symbol of peace. What does he mean exactly about that?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of substance into what President Moon says there. And there was a lot of skepticism early last year when Moon talked about turning the joint security area, not just the joint security area, but the entire demilitarized zone into a peace zone. And we've seen big steps there. We've seen the de-escalation inside the zone. We've seen the soldiers in the joint security area removing their guns. It's now a gun-free zone. Remember, we saw that DPRK soldier defecting last year, and he was shot numerous times. It was also shot by automatic weapons, which even those were forbidden. Now all weapons have been taken out of the joint security area on both sides. There's no more helmets in there. Plans are afoot in that area to turn it into a truly neutral zone, where the 35 troops from the DPRK and the 35 troops from South Korea who are positioned there can actually move around freely and interact across that space. That is still perhaps a little way off, but we really are feeling a different atmosphere. I was in there recently and I visited areas of the joint security area we were absolutely forbidden to go to before. So we could wander quite freely around to the Freedom Bridge, the bridge where Kim Jong Un and Moon Jae-in sat and had their little face-to-face talk alone during their first summit. We walked around to other areas. In fact, we strolled at leisure around the whole southern side of the joint security area. Would have been absolutely unthinkable 12 months ago. I've been there more than a dozen times, and it's always been very restricted where we could go, and very tense, the atmosphere down there. So it really has changed. But of course, President Moon also talking about all of the steps that they want to take further, he and Kim Jong Un. So yeah, having that neutral zone, but really pulling back the heavy weapons away from the demilitarized zone. Moon would like to see those big guns taken away that are targeting Seoul, but also talking about short-range missiles ultimately somewhere down the road on this process being removed by both sides, those short-range missiles that can target either side. But again, all of this needs the big picture diplomacy to restart, and that is the denuclearization diplomacy. And clearly there are some signs, even if this is a photo opportunity, more than a substantive summit today, there are some signs that's happening.
And Jack, if this momentum of peace keeps going forward, what does that mean for inter-Korean connectivity? Because I recall recently you went on a train trip very close to the Dprk, and the two sides have been talking about the possibility of a railway link.
That's right. That train track is just a few hundred meters from where I'm standing, and it runs through to the Kaesong Joint Industrial Area, which is currently shuttered. But in theory, the tracks run all the way up to Pyongyang into China. On the eastern seaboard, they run through into Russia. And, the tracks are there. They need to be upgraded, but they don't need to be laid. In theory, if relations really warmed, you could jump on a train in Busan and ride it all the way to Paris in France. That level of connectivity already exists. It's just political will that's standing in the way. So President Moon's talking about a multi-billion dollar upgrade, for the DPRK's road and rail infrastructure. That, of course, needs sanctions to be eased, even if it's just in a limited way. So it'll take some time to get going. But the deal that we understand, that President Moon is really trying to encourage Kim and Trump to adopt, is one in which the Yongbyon nuclear processing facility would be completely scrapped. And that is the main one. There are others, to be sure. That wouldn't completely end the DPRK's ability to produce nuclear weapons, but the main production facility, shut that down in return for limited economic cooperation with South Korea. So not with the rest of the world, it just needs to be a limited lifting. But it would be very significant, and no doubt it would include those projects. But again, it needs progress in these talks.
Thank you very much. Our correspondent Jack Barton at the DMZ. Now you're watching live footage from the DMZ, and according to the frame we've been getting, it could be very close to the peace village of Panmunjom, and the press are there looking forward to the arrival of U.S. President Donald Trump. So obviously this is on the south side of the demarcation line. Looking north, we can see the blue house, the iconic blue house of the Panmunjom Peace Village. And the US President Donald Trump and DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un are expected to meet at the Peace Village of Panmunjom. And Mr. Turn, earlier we were talking about the possibility of a handshake. So, US President Donald Trump has arrived at the meeting venue for himself, and DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un. From the live footage, we can see that the meeting is highly likely to take place at the peace village of Panmunjom. US President Donald Trump is walking towards the north side of the demarcation line.
Good to see you again. I've never expected to meet you at this place.
자, 거기에서 한발자국 보내시면
가장 처음으로 땅을 밟으시는 대통령이 됐습니다.
If Your Excellency take a step forward, you will be the first U.S. president to cross this line.
Get out of the way. Move. Clear. All of you. Clear. No.
Very good.
Hey. Come on. Move.
Guys.
Wait till they move.
Come on, guys.
Wait till they move.
This is a great moment.
Big moment. Big progress. Tremendous progress.
Okay, guys, come on. Come on. Go. Straight, they're going straight.
I might have failed set.
And you said yes. I said
Hey, Trump, well done.
How do you feel?
feel great. It's a great honor to be here.
Stop.
As you can see, this shows that nobody has expected this moment.
Mr. President, U.S. school right here. U.S. school right here.
Chairman Kim, how do you feel?
김 위원장님 어떻게 기분이 어떠십니까?
오늘 트럼프 대통령이 물리선을 넘어서 우리 땅을 밟았는데 사상 처음으로 우리 땅을 밟은 미국 대통령이 되셨습니다.
President Trump has just walked across the demarcation line that made him the first U.S. president to visit our country.
이 행동 자체만 보시지 말고 이 트럼프 대통령께서 분리선을 넘어서 가신 거는 다시 말하면 좋지 않은 그 과거를 청산하고.
Looking at this action, this is an expression of his willingness to eliminate all the unfortunate past and open a new future.
I just want to say that this is my honor. I didn't really expect it. We were in Japan for the G20. We came over and I said, hey, I'm over here. I want to call Chairman Kim. And we got to meet, and stepping across that line was a great honor. A lot of progress has been made. A lot of friendships have been made, and this has been in particular a great friendship. So I just want to thank you. That was very quick notice, and I want to thank you.
내가 지금 얘기하고 싶은 거는 아주 무한한 영광이다라는 얘기입니다. 내가 G20에 왔다가 한국에 오게 되니까 그런데 김 위원장한테 전화를 하고 연락을 해서 한번 만나야 되겠다라고 했습니다. 그러니까 오랜 통보를 하지 않았는데도 즉각 응답해 주셔서 대단히 감사드립니다. 우리는 지금까지 아주 엄청난 많은 진전을 이루었다고 생각합니다. 그리고 영광입니다.
So we're going to go inside. We're going to talk for a little while about different things, and a lot of really positive things are happening, and I'm glad you could be here to see it. But tremendous positivity, really great things are happening, and in a lot of places. But we met and we liked each other from day one, and that was very important.
조금 있다가 우리가 시간을 보내서 서로 그 얘기를 좀 할 예정입니다. 지금까지 우리는 대단한 그러한 진전을 이루었습니다. 우리는 서로 만나자마자 서로 아주 느낌이 좋았습니다. 그리고 서로 좋아하고 있습니다. 아마도 많은 진전을 이룰 수 있을 것 같습니다.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
I would invite him right now. To the White House.
Guys, back. Stay behind me.
아이고, 저좀 Move. Come on. Do your job. Come on, let's go. Let's go, bud. Come on, let's go. Come on, play ball, man. That's all I'm asking.
Mark.
So this has actually happened. US President Donald Trump has met with the DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un at the demarcation line, and this is history in the making. DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un invited US President Donald Trump to walk across over the demarcation line.
It's a great day really for the world if you think of it. Beyond North Korea, South Korea, it's a great day for the world, and it's an honor for me to be here. And thank you both very much.
I'm the U.S. fool. I'm the U.S. fool. I'm the U.S. fool. Come here. Thank you. Yeah, he's okay. He's okay. Excuse me, official. I don't have a shot. No, I don't have a shot.
Presented such a big hope to the 80,000 people as well as so I do look forward to great progress being made in your.
You're watching live footage from the Peace Village of Panmunjom. Right now, US President Donald Trump is meeting with the DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un on the south side of the demarcation line.
The chairman's honor, I can say we worked well together.
The two have just
내가 또 얘기해야 될 것은 내가 처음 대통령을 취임했을 때 이 그 한반도에는 상당히 많은 갈등과 그런 의심의 의혹이 있었습니다. 그런데 이제 완전히 반대가 되었습니다. 엄청나게 많은 그런 진전이 있었고 그런 그 맥락에서 두 분 정상께 감사드립니다.
나도 이 자리를 함께 밝은 앞을 관망할 수 있는 순간을 마련하는데 커다란 공헌을 하신 분께 감사의 말씀을 드리겠습니다.
I would like to also take this opportunity to express my gratitude for all your assistance. Having such a good opportunity.
Okay, switch back. Yes, all of us. To the back. All of us together. Yes. Back to the yellow line, guys. Back to the yellow line.
You're watching live footage from the JSA, the Peace Village, to be specific. US President Donald Trump have met with the DPRK leader Kim Jong Un at the demarcation line, and he walked across that line into the DPRK territory, making him the first sitting US president, to step on the DPRK territory, and then to walk back to the south side of the demarcation line and addressed the press briefly. And then the three leaders, US President Donald Trump, South Korean President Moon Jae-in, and DPRK's top leader Kim Jong Un, had brief talks, and now they've entered that building and maybe holding more formal talks. So that will be possibly a trilateral meeting. So, Mr. Tang, what do you make of this history in the making? The first US president stepped on the DPRK territory.
I think this is the most symbolic step by President Donald Trump on the territory of DPRK. Actually, since the ending
and let's remember that DPRK's leader Kim Jong Un invited him to walk across that demarcation line.
Yeah, this actually arrangement by the two sides. I am sure before the meeting yesterday, they should have some arrangement for such a step. And I think Donald Trump, President of the United States, has become the first president, a sitting president to
also the first president. That's correct.
From the ending of World War II, not Korean War. So this is very symbolic for the two sides to cooperate, to engage, at this time, and they will continue such a momentum of engagement. And I'm sure President Trump, is very happy. He said a lot about.
Yeah, he said it's an honor for him, and he said this is a great day for the country and for the whole world.
And another point that I'd like to mention here is the meeting. Actually, this is a trilateral meeting among 3 leaders from Dprk, from ROK, and from the United States. Actually,
and as we speak, this meeting is underway.
Yeah, actually, at the very early stage, I mean, during the preparation for Singapore summit, Jae-in even proposed he would like to be one part of the summit, and denied by the United States and by Dprk. And also, this year, I mean, in February, another summit, the second summit between President Donald Trump and Chairman Kim Jong Un, Jae-in also proposed to have such a meeting in Seoul or some other places, and he would like to be one part. But this time, he suddenly has realized his dream to have a trilateral summit in Panmunjom. This is
so you're saying that this kind of trilateral meeting has always been the pursuit of South Korea as well?
Yeah. Okay. This is actually a dream in the mind of President Jae-in of ROK. And
why this is so important to him?
Because since he took the office, I think in 2016, and he proposed repeatedly on the peace and stability in Korean Peninsula, but he had got nothing from the countries concerned. Only after the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, I think early last year, the role played by ROK has been there, and very important. And actually, I think ROK has been an important bridge for the meetings, for the summit, for the engagement between Dprk and the United States. I think the role is very important, and Jae-in would like to be somebody in the promotion of the peace and stability in Korean Peninsula, and he would like to pursue Donald Trump to give more compromise at this moment, because Dprk has already done something. For example, the dysfunction of the nuclear test site, and also some other nuclear facilities. And so I think
now we are watching live footage from inside that building the 3 leaders walked into, and this is a one-on-one occasion between US President Donald Trump and Dprk's top leader Kim Jong Un.
미리 사전에 합의된 만남이 아닌가 이런 말들도 하던데, 사실 난 어제 아침에 대통령께서 그런 의향을 표시하신 걸 보고 나 역시 깜짝 놀랐고, 정식으로 오늘 여기서 만날 걸 제안하시는 말씀을 오후 늦은 시간에야 이렇게 알게 됐습니다.
Some people think as if this meeting was pre-arranged through the letters you have sent me. But myself was surprised yesterday morning when you expressed the willingness to meet with me here, and also when we got the official confirmation late yesterday afternoon.
나도 각하를 다시 만나고 싶고, 또 이 만남 자체가 특히나 이런 장소에서 만나면 우리 북과 남 사이에는 분단의 상징이고, 또 이렇게 나쁜 과거를 연상케 하게 되는 이런 자리에서 오랜 적대적 관계였던 우리 두 나라가 이렇게 여기서 평화의 악수를 하는 것 자체가 어제와 달라짐 없는 걸 표현하는 것이고, 앞으로 더 좋게 우리가 변할 수 있다는 걸 모든 사람들한테 보여주는 만남이라고 난 긍정적으로 생각했고, 또 앞으로 우리가 하는 행동에 긍정적인 영향을 미칠 수 있다고 생각했습니다.
Also, I've always wanted to meet with you again, and this place about meeting is a symbol of the separation between the North and the South, and also a reminder of unfortunate past. And as the 2 countries which share a long unfortunate past, meeting at such a place shows that we are willing to put an end to the unfortunate past and also open a new future and provide positive opportunities in the future.
우리 각하와 나와 사이 존재하는 그런 훌륭한 관계가 아니라면 아마 이 하루 만에 이런 상봉이 전격적으로 이루어지지 못했을 거라고 생각합니다. 그래서 난 앞으로 각하와 이런 훌륭한 관계가 남들이 예상 못하는 그런 계속 좋은 일들을 계속 만들면서 우리가 앞으로 해야 될 일들에 그 맞닿는 그런 난관과 장애를 견인하는 극복하는 그런 신비로운 그런 힘으로 될 거라고 확신합니다.
If it was not for our excellent relation between the two of us, it would not have been possible to have this kind of opportunity. So I would like to use this strong relation to create more good news, which nobody expects in the past, and also to propel the good relationship with our country, propel peace.
Well, I want to thank you, Chairman. You hear the power of that voice. Nobody's heard that voice before. He doesn't do news conferences, in case you haven't heard. And this was a special moment. And this is, I think, really, as President Moon said, this is a historic moment, the fact that we're meeting. And I want to thank Chairman Kim for something else. When I put out the social media notification, if he didn't show up, the press was going to make me look very bad. So you made us both look good, and I appreciate it. But we've developed a great relationship. I really think that if you go back 2.5 years and you look at what was going on prior to my becoming president, it was a very, very bad situation, a very dangerous situation for South Korea, for North Korea, for the world. And I think the relationship that we've developed has meant so much to so many people. And it's just an honor to be with you, and it was an honor that you asked me to step over that line, and I was proud to step over the line. I thought you might do that. I wasn't sure, but I was ready to do it, and I want to thank you. It's been great. It's been great. Very historic. They were just saying, one of the folks from the media was saying this could be a very historic moment, and I guess that's what it is. But I enjoy being with you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brad.
All right, guys, back out the door, please. Back out the door. Straight up back. Straight back out, guys. Thank you. Straight back out. Go ahead. Go. Okay, I got your platform. Okay, I got your platform.
Sorry.
It's a big surprise. For real. All right. Back out. Go. Let's go.
Press, come on. Caesar.
No.
So, US President Donald Trump and the Dprk's top leader Kim Jong Un have just addressed the press before their formal one-on-one meeting starts. And in his speech, Chairman Kim Jong Un first addressed the kind of unusual diplomatic arrangement of this time's meeting. He also used very positive words on US Dprk ties, and specifically he mentioned this excellent relation between himself and US President Donald Trump. And in his address, the US President echoed this good relation, and he even said he wasn't sure about walking across the demarcation line into the north until the Dprk leader invited him. Now, Mr. Tang, from the words we just heard, it was a mix of expectation and the unexpected. Do you think the invitation to walk across the demarcation line is totally unprepared? Because from the US President's words, it was not your expectation earlier.
Actually, they have changed letters before this event, and only by Twitter. I think just before the G20 summit in Osaka, President Trump proposed, on his Twitter that he would like to meet Chairman Kim Jong Un in Panmunjom, and this is a very important arrangement. As he said, he was not sure that Chairman Kim Jong Un would like to accept such an invitation. I think, of course, he had some, assessment on the situation, and I'm sure he should be very familiar with Chairman Kim Jong Un and what Kim Jong Un is thinking about, and
much more to our early expectation. This is not a simple handshake or walking across the demarcation line. A formal meeting is happening right now as we speak. So this is much more formal than we earlier expected. So maybe we should not use the word symbolic. Maybe there will be substantial content to their meeting. Do you think so?
Yeah, I think if you have a comparison with the previous two summits, one in Singapore, another in Hanoi, you can find this meeting, not a summit. I think it's very specific. Arranged. For example, they gesture the briefing to the correspondents and also the meeting room. Actually very specific arranged. Some staffs of the Trump administration, just standing far away.
The camera was very quick, wasn't he? Jared Kushner was there, Ivanka Trump was there, and surprisingly, Mike Pompeo is there.
Another room, not outside.
Exactly.
His
just outside that meeting
his daughter-in-law
room.
actually just on side in the meeting room, in the briefing room.
Kushner and Ivanka.
And other staff, especially the Secretary of State. Before this meeting, actually,
the Dprk has pointed out.
Chairman Kim Jong Un said, "No, this the bad guy. We would not like to meet him."
Yeah, it was again. The Dprk official media saying that they would not talk to this.
They would like to meet him again. So this is actually a very specific arranged meeting, and Pompeo and his colleagues just in another room. But the cameras, I mean the correspondents are very sensitive and catch these photos and gave the broadcasting abroad.
So since we mentioned the staffing problem, who's actually shaping up the U.S. policy regarding the DPRK right now? Is it Mike Pompeo? Is it the hawkish staff? Or there are still some rational elements in the State Department?
Actually, I think at this moment the key player actually is President Donald Trump himself. Why Chairman Kim Jong Un and DPRK officials said they don't like Pompeo, they would like to talk directly to the president because Pompeo cannot give the final decision on various issues, and if Pompeo reached agreement.
What issues are you referring to? Why they're so big that the Secretary of State cannot decide? It has to be the President of the U.S. to decide.
This is actually a very specific political situation for President Donald Trump. He would like to change ideas, at 1 minute, and then change another one. So, and the agreement reached by his colleagues, I mean by secretaries of state, of treasury, and Donald Trump can abandon it. So this is actually a very specific situation in the United States. In Washington D.C., only one person can give the final decision. That is to say, President Donald Trump. And I'm sure Chairman Kim Jong Un is quite familiar with the situation. The DPRK.
So you think this also is exactly why both the two leaders have emphasized the good personal relationship in the earlier address?
This is very specific relations, I think, between the two countries, between the two leaders. And Chairman Kim Jong Un would like to have face-to-face, like this one dialogue or negotiation with President Donald Trump and gave all the thinkings to the president, not to president's assistants like Secretary of State. This is very specific politics in Washington. If you visit Washington, you can hear a lot stories about the style of President Donald Trump in his administration.
Right, Mr. Teng, we began back to you on this. Now let's cross live to our correspondent Shane Harm in Seoul. Shane, so this is history in the making, and the two leaders have actually met, and now they're